All right, so today we're going to be doing an unboxing. This is going to be a long video, warning. We're going to learn about what can the saints teach us and how they can heal us. And I'm going to give you examples from my own life. You may or may not be interested, but I hope you listen to the whole thing. So this is real. It is genuine. We have the Spanish seal of the Vatican on the back. The strings were not cut. This is the real deal, boys and girls. And so let's go ahead and talk about what we have here. All right, so what we have here is a first class ex ossibus, which is bone, relic of Saint Thérèse of the infant Jesus, and also known as Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. And I probably pronounced that incorrectly, but it doesn't matter at this point. So it needs to be cleaned. I will clean it. We're going to have a discussion about how this saint has actually changed my life. Now, I have two other first-class relics of her in my collection. This is actually I have two first-class relics. This makes it three. And then I have two other second-class relics of the saint. I love this saint so much, and this saint has actually started to heal me. And I'll tell you my story of healing through Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. Now, if you think this is a sermon or a religious video, you may be partially right, but it's really not. It's for anybody. You don't have to be religious to learn the lessons that I've learned from Saint Thérèse. And here she is. I made this third-class relic. First class is of the body of the saint, whether it be a piece of skin, a piece of the body parts, bone, or what have you. Second class is of something they wore or touched in life. It could be a pen, a book, a piece of clothing. You get my drift. Third class is when you take an object, whether it be a rosary or a crucifix or a prayer card, and touch it to the first class relic. Now it becomes a third class relic. And I've made this. I've added beautiful flowers in here. And, all right, so we'll read the prayer of Saint Therese, or Therese. And by the way, I cleaned this, and I still left the patina in the, it's like wires. I don't know if you could see that. I think they call that filigree. I did leave as much patina as I could on it, but I shined it up and cleaned off some of the black, which silver gets. This is silver. And this was probably made when she was canonized on May 17th, 1925. And it was probably that old, and that's why it's really dirty. And wow, look at this, okay? This is a huge relic. They're usually half the size as this. I can attest to that. All right, so what is basically the premise of Saint Thérèse? And you can see it in this prayer. For example, morning offering of Saint Thérèse. Oh my God, I offer thee all my actions of this day for the intentions and for the glory of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I desire to sanctify every beat of my heart, my every thought, my simplest works, by uniting them to his infinite merit. And I wish to make reparation for my sins by casting them into the furnace of his merciful love. Oh my God, I ask of thee for myself and for those whom I hold dear, the grace to fulfill perfectly the holy will, to accept for love of thee the joys and sorrows of this passing life, so that we may one day be united together in heaven for all certainty. Amen. All right, so you don't even have to be Catholic to listen to those words. And what were her virtues? All right, so Saint Thérèse always knew she could never be a great saint. She was not destined for great things. She was a regular person, just like you and I, who had everyday trials and tribulations. She joined a convent of the Carmelites in France, and she was just an ordinary nun. She had no special powers, no special talents. She even had trouble praying the rosary. There were other nuns, especially one nun. I think she was, I think they called her Augustine, and Augustine irritated her daily. Augustine was not very nice. She was what we know one of the mean girls. Yes, you can get mean girls in a convent. And I believe they called her Sister Augustine. Well, she wasn't very nice to Saint Thérèse. And Saint Thérèse admitted in her journal, The Story of a Soul, that she did not like her very much either. Sister Augustine would do the meanest things to her. Basically, if they were doing dishes together, which they all had to do as a group, she would splash bubbles in Saint Therese's face. She would give her mean looks. She was not very friendly. And Saint Therese wanted to, I'm not saying word for word what she wanted to do because she probably wouldn't say it like this, but for all of us, she'd probably want to give her a slap across the cheek or tell her off. Or tell her to go buzz off, or what have you, whatever, you're annoyed. You're generally annoyed. Somebody is actually making a fool into you and being cruel and mean and not very nice. And Saint Therese, instead of barking back, she would take a deep breath and think of Jesus and remember how Jesus was mistreated and mocked and spit upon and spat upon and flogged and beaten and crucified. And she tried her best not to find hate for Sister Augustine and some of the other nuns who would clack their beads during prayer, making it so loud when she had trouble as it was with her prayers that would distract her and agitate her. And instead of being unkind and mean, she found love for these people. Yes, love. And you say, love? How could you love your enemy? They're your enemy. So the premise of Saint Therese is you can become basically a saint by doing the littlest deeds. The littlest deeds such as smiling at somebody who's unkind to you, saying a kind word to someone who's unkind to you, praying for your enemies or people that are really mean to you or hurt you in very terrible ways. It's in the tiniest little actions we do each day. And I've learned a lesson. And it's helping to heal my life. And I'll tell you how this miracle has happened. Okay, if you follow me, you know I have PTSD. I have severe panic disorder, which leaves me with extremely bad anxiety, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where I get panic attacks. And I have agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is when you're afraid to leave your house because you're going to get a panic attack. And you do not want to be far from your house if you're having a panic attack because you want to get home really quickly. So if you're in Oshkosh B'gosh or in the middle of the sticks and you're like, 50 miles away from your house and you're having a panic attack, the last thing you need to do is to be in Oshkosh B'gosh. You want to be back to your house or teleported back to your house immediately to save yourself the embarrassment and the horror of having a panic attack somewhere where it's not safe. So I've been grappling with these conditions for quite some time due to very bad traumas in my life that have happened starting from the age of 4 and 5 years old. And so I started with panic attacks at the age of 5. And it wasn't diagnosed until about 1993, 1994. And I suffered a long while. Now, there's nothing that basically can be done about my condition. You go to therapist, you're on medication, but it's with you forever. And so you can work through them and mitigate through them, but there's no cure. There's really no cure until I started getting better. Nothing, no intervention from any mental health people really have helped me. Actually, the current therapist I have now is fantastic, but he's still not the one that I consider the person that is helping me. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. All right, so I had hatred in my heart for many years for people that caused me trauma. And so I'm trauma dumping. Yes, I know I'm trauma dumping, but I want you guys to learn something that I've learned and how it's helped me so much. It may help you with your panic attacks, PTSD flashbacks, PTSD in general, social anxiety and agoraphobia, and the list goes on. Depression. All right, so I was actually, when I was at the age of about 14, my mom had some kind of undiagnosed bipolar borderline disorder. She was very, very, very unpredictable. She was a very good mother, but at the drop of a hat, she can do 0 to 60 and go weird. And when I say weird, she would do really, really crazy things. She would, on the drop of a hat, if she felt like she wasn't appreciated enough, she would take all your things and throw it out the window and humiliate you in front of all the neighbors. She would get revenge on people who were unkind to her. And I would watch it And I would hide in the corner because if I was it, I was the next one. And I didn't want to be the next one. And so my mother would constantly seek revenge for those who've hurt her pride. And her pride, and they say pride is one of the deadliest sins. My mother's pride was so important to her that if anybody crossed her path in the way that she didn't like, she would do really terrible things. One example was, there's loads of them. This is like a sort of lighthearted one. My babysitter, who became my godmother when I was a little kid, was being bullied by a group of high school girls, mean girls, like maybe Sister Augustine. And what happened was my mother said, "Why didn't you hit them back? Why didn't you punch them in the face?" Now, we grew up in New York City. You sort of punch people in the face. It's tough. It's mean. It's the city. And so she said, "But I don't want to hurt anybody." And my mother said, "I'm sorry. I know I'm going to probably spew an expletive. What are you, a PU?" And it ends in a Y. And so my mother said, "We're going to get the rottenest tomatoes. We're going to go to the produce department." Produce, back then they had produce stores. You didn't go to the supermarket. "And pick the ripest, most softest tomatoes that you can find, because we're going to get those B words." And I was like 4 or 5, and I was like, what? And so they got a huge paper bag, like giant-sized paper bag, filled them up with tomatoes. My mother got in her car, which we called the Pimp Mobile, because it had white wall tires and tinted windows. It looked like a mafia car. And my mother said, "Show me where those B words are, and we're going to throw tomatoes at them." And I'm like, what? And so she told my mother where to find these girls all hanging out on a corner. And she said, my mother was the driver. So it was a drive-by tomato shooting, whatever you want to call it. And I hope YouTube doesn't ban this video because I said the S word. Okay, so they were driving. My mom was driving. My godmother and / babysitter, who was a teenager at the time, rolled her window down. And my mother said, "Aim. Start throwing the tomatoes at them." And she missed every single time she threw the tomato. And my mother was pissed off and turned around and said, "You suck. You can't even throw tomatoes right." So my mother's basically whole premise was, if somebody is unkind to you, mean to you, bullying you, or nasty to you, or not nice, screw them. We're going to get them back. And so fast forward, when I was like 14 or 15, my mother just decided one day that she didn't want to be a mother anymore, and she deserved to be happy. So she threw me and my father out into the street. Yes, this is a true story. I came home from school, was walking home with my books. I see my dad packing up the family car, and I'm like, "Dad, what are you doing?" He's like, "We're leaving because Mom doesn't want us anymore." And I said, "You're a liar. She doesn't want you. She wants me." Yes, I was a punk teenager. My father said, "No, she doesn't want you either." Turns out she moved another man into my house and decided she didn't want me anymore. And I was so filled with depression, the dark days of depression, filled with anxiety, was crying all the time because I wanted to go home. I wanted my mother. And I'd call her on the phone and say, "Mom, I really want to go home. Can I come home?" And she'd say, "Next week." And I'd call her next week, and she'd say next week, until my dad found out she moved another man in the house in our place. And I was filled with hatred and rage and unforgiveness from what this man did, because moving into the house, knowing that my mother has a child and not caring that she has a child, made me hate him. Well, not only was I filled with rage for her, he was the target. I hated this man. Because of him, I suffered greatly. And so did my dad, because he had a heart attack and had to go to the hospital because of the horror of this. So fast forward like a year later, my dad meets my stepmom. My stepmom hated me, disliked me in every single way possible, where I gave her no reason to dislike me. I was always polite, respectful, and kind. But she kept throwing zingers at me. "You're this, you're that." Always constantly putting me down and telling me what a piece of garbage I was when I wasn't. And my dad never stuck up for me because he was afraid of the woman he's still with now. And so what happened was I was like, "Dad, why don't you stick up for me?" But my dad would never stick up for me because this new woman was chosen over me. So twice I was abandoned. So fast forward, let's fast forward to, 2024. And my mom, 2021, my mom dies. And that man was living in her house. And he refused to leave her house. He ended up getting stage 4 cancer. And what have we been doing now? His own children, he has adult children, don't bother with him because he wasn't a very good father. And we're taking care of him around the clock. He can't even get up and walk. He soils himself because he can't even get up. So my husband is actually more so taking care of him than me. But I decided I never wanted to see him again. That's it. He hurt me when I was younger and all through my life. And because of him, I didn't get the love from my mother that I deserved. So screw him, and I don't care if he dies. That's not very nice, or is it? What would you think? Write in the comments below. Could you forgive somebody that knew that you were your mother's child and moved into your mother's house and didn't give a crap that you got thrown into the street? I'd like to know if you could find forgiveness for that. Write it in the comments below. Okay, so fast forward to now, and then Saint Therese's way. I thought about it. What can I do that could be selfless? Well, I don't like leaving the house ever because of my issues. And so one day I decided I'm going to forgive this man. He's dying, and I'm going to give him that grace. Yeah, I'm going to actually erase all the memories of my hatred for him and find love in my heart for the man that hurt me so badly. Well, you can blame it on my mother. It was all my mother's fault for causing this. It's really not his fault that she decided to choose him over me. That's what my therapist said. Hi, Max, by the way. I don't think you're watching me. And so I went there. Now, I don't leave the house for nothing. My house could be on fire, and I don't leave my house. I had to get my license renewed this week. It was like 3 hours of turmoil, if you know what I mean, with panic and anxiety. So I went with my husband all the way, like an hour away, to go help with this man. And he cried. And I didn't think he would cry, and he was so happy to see me. His spirits perked up so much he started eating. He has cancer so bad he can't even hold his food down. He started eating, and he was holding my hand the whole time I was there and telling me he loved me. I never thought that would happen. Thank you, Saint Therese. So I left the house. I didn't think of myself. Now, when you have these disorders, whether it be PTSD, severe anxiety, panic disorder, agoraphobia, or whatever it is, you become the most self-centered human being. And I'm not saying it in a bad way. You become actually selfish because the whole time you don't want to be uncomfortable. You don't want your disorder to make you suffer. So you don't do things that are hard. So you give up doing things that are hard because you don't want to feel uncomfortable and have yourself triggered. And so I did the opposite. Instead of thinking of my own self and my own suffering, I went in the car for an hour, which I can't even do 5 minutes generally, without freaking out. And I took care of a dying man and told this dying man that I loved him. And he told me he loved me back. And I found forgiveness. But the miracle was I left the house. And I drove with my husband for over an hour to see this man and an hour back to see this man when I hated him my whole life. And I blamed him for my suffering. And it turned out that, guess what? Through that, I found courage enough to leave my house and not think of myself and my own problems. I put somebody else that I hated ahead of me. This is a real miracle, boys and girls. And when I gave the hated man my grace and my love that was undeserved, I got love back. And it really shocked me how that could actually happen. Okay, so fast forward to this week. My dad ended up going into the hospital because he had a clot in his lung and it was life-threatening. And I don't do hospitals very well because my mom in 2021 died from stage 4 cancer. And when I saw what I saw, and I saw my mom dying and jaundiced and nothing but a skeleton, it scared the bejesus out of me. Now, I would like to say some other words, but I'm not going to do this right now in the presence of greatness. And so I was terrified. My triggers are hospitals. And my trigger is my stepmom because she's never been very nice to me at all. I'll give you an example of one unkindness, there were very many. And I had a job. My dad owned a small business, a factory, and I had a job working at my dad's place, and I had my own apartment and needed to pay my rent. And she said one day, she had a brother, "My brother deserves your job. So you have 2 weeks notice." And my father was sitting right there and didn't stick up for me. She said, "My brother's taking your job, so go find yourself another job." And I was in the back seat of the car because they would drive me to work. I didn't have a car. Weeping and crying hysterical because I lost my job and I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent anymore because she decided her brother deserved my job. Isn't that cruel? So when my dad was in the hospital, she had no way to get back and forth to see my dad, but I wanted to see my dad. So I decided to do the little way and the little things you do to become great. And so I called my stepmother up, who I am not a happy camper when I talk to her. She's not very nice to me at all. She's very mean, and my dad never sticks up for me. And so I said to my stepmom, "I'm going to pick you up," because she was going to take a taxi to see my dad. "I'm going to pick you up and drive you there. And we're going to visit my dad together. And I'm going to drive you home." And she said, "No, I'm taking a taxi." And I said, "But you have a car. Why don't you drive to the hospital?" And she said, "Because parking is $2 an hour. And I'm not paying $2 an hour." I'm not kidding you. She didn't want to pay the $2 an hour parking. Okay. So I said, "I'm picking you up and I'm paying the $2 an hour parking." And I was very nice to her. And my dad never, ever, ever compliments me. Ever. He's always very highly critical of me. So I went into the hospital, saw my dad hooked up to all sorts of machines. It was very scary. So I didn't think of my own discomfort, and I thought about other people. And I went into the hospital and saw my father in a really bad way. And my stepmother was a pain in the ass. And I'm going to say it right now. Sorry. And I'm sure I'm forgiven. And my father turned around and was so happy to see me. He smiled and said to his wife, "Look what my daughter did for you. With her illness, she sacrificed to get you here. And didn't she do a marvelous job?" So 2 times, I left my house with severe anxiety. And I'll tell you what happened on the way there. On the way to picking up my stepmother, it was like the devil or bad luck was testing me. I went to get gas and I did not know my new car. When you slightly shut the door with it still running and you're getting gas, it locks you out of the car. And my key fob was in there. And so I panicked and I said, "Oh my God," my window was only open like this much. And I said, I can't not show up. I have to see my father and do what I need to do today to be kind, like Saint Thérèse. And so I told the gas station attendant I was an idiot. And I said, "Do you have a long stick?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And he unscrewed the wooden handle off of a broom and handed it to me. And I went over to the window and I prayed to God. And I prayed to Saint Anthony. And I forgot to pray to her. And I said, "Please, Saint Anthony, please help me get these keys back out of this car so I can be on my way." And so I stuck my hand in the little slot of the window, and it would only get up to partially like before my elbow. Couldn't reach the damn keys. So I stuck the stick in, and I had a bangle, which I'll show you. So thank God I have one of these bracelet bangles because it was on the edge of my seat about to fall onto the floor. If it would have fell onto the floor, I would have had to call a tow truck. Okay, that's the type. Now, I was nervous from my panic and my anxiety. And so I stuck the broom handle in the tiny little slot that the window is open like this. And I had to do a surgeon precision because the broom handle was very wide. It wasn't as thin as this stick. And I had to go like this. Now, this was dangling over the edge of my seat. And I had to go in there very, very, boys and girls, it was hard. It was surgery. And I had to get in there like this. And then it moved closer to the edge of the seat and was about to fall off. And I went like this. And people were watching me at the gas station. They were watching intently. And I went like this. And then I got it to the edge of the stick. And it was right at the slot of the window. And I actually pulled it through the slot of the window. And I got my keys. And I got to get on with my day, boys and girls, which was a miracle. So I do have to say, my stepmother wasn't as, she's very persnickety and always complains and is sort of depressive, always whining, well, not whining, but complaining and being very nervous. She has very nervous energy. And nervous energy is not good for someone with panic disorder or anxiety, or anybody for that matter. And her nervous energy, as I was sitting in the car with her driving to get to the hospital, made me very, very anxious. I wanted to pull the car over on the side of the road and give up. And I didn't. And I put up with her incessant belly aching and moaning and groaning and just being absolutely negative, and got to the hospital to see my father. And I made my father proud because he knew how bad my illness is, and that I showed up there because I didn't think of myself. I stopped being selfish. Even though people were mean to me and not kind to me, my dad was just so happy. His spirits lifted so much. He was making jokes in the hospital room and joking with all the nurses, and his spirit was alive with happiness. And I learned something from this saint, Saint Thérèse, that now I can do more things than I've ever done before by not thinking of myself and my discomfort and worrying about other people's happiness. And you might say, that's ridiculous. Are you stupid or something? My mother, if she was still alive, would chastise me for this. She'd say, what are you, a moron? In her best New York accent. What are you, a moron? What are you, stupid? Like you're doing nice things for these assholes. Oh, excuse me. And why would you be doing that? She always hated that I had a relationship with my dad. Even though she did what she did to me, she'd say, he's a jerk. He's cold-hearted. Don't bother with him. And she hated my stepmother. Well, didn't hate her, but just didn't like her because of the way she treated me. But yet my own mother treated me that way. And she'd say, don't talk to those jerks. And so my mother would say, you're nothing but meek. She would constantly call me meek. She'd say, what's wrong with you? You're not my daughter. You can't be my daughter. You're not a fighter or tough like me. But guess what? I have the mightiest soul of all because I found forgiveness, and through forgiveness I found the grace of God, and I found healing because I was able to do things I haven't been able to do in years by leaving my house and driving more than 1 mile from my house without having a meltdown on the side of the road. So what did we learn today, boys and girls? We learned about the virtue of doing the littlest things can make you the mightiest lion and could actually heal you. And there's a hawk flying by my house right now, right above me as I speak. And I always ask God to send me the hawk, a symbol of the hawk or an actual hawk, which are very rare in my area where I live, to let me know that what I'm doing is correct. And I just got my confirmation. That's right. I just got my confirmation. Saint Thérèse, thank you. Saint Thérèse, pray for us all. And if you're not religious, try it. Give it a try. Be kind to someone who's not so kind to you. And if they're still unkind to you, well, you could say F them and walk away. But watch what happens. Sometimes you might get a little surprised. You might realize you're tougher than you know by putting up with their antics, and finding some kind of good in the bad might help heal you. I'll see you guys all soon. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I love to hear your insight. This was not a sermon. It was not meant to be religious, because Saint Thérèse could have been anybody in history. But I did learn that I found courage through giving up my own comforts. I found courage and I found love.